We just made a whole boot.
Yes, we did.
Or at least talked through the
and it
process.
only took like an hour and a half.
Look at that. We can just pump them out. It's so easy. Very nice. So after hardware, we move on to lasting or wet lasting.
Mm-hmm.
So this is actually pulling your boot into shape. This is how like your boot size, if that's where your boot size comes into play there.
Correct.
Explain that process to me.
When the uppers are sewn together and all the hardware is in, we set up 20 pair of boots on a rolling rack that has its 4 tiers. There's 5 boots per tier, 5 pairs of boots. We pull the last for the size and the style of the shoe mold. The last is the mold that we build the boot on. We pull the inner sole. You know, if you are getting a safety toe, that's when that is determined on size as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then that goes over to the shoemaker. And the first thing that the shoemaker is going to do is they're going to take a few nails and they're going to take that shoe last and they're going to nail the inner sole, the raw inner sole, to the shoe last. And they're going to do all 40 of them. And then they're going to set that aside. Then another, typically Serge, is the one who does the trimming. And he has an extremely razor sharp lip knife. And he trims the inner sole to the shape of the shoe last. And that's a really important step.
Yeah.
That's the base of the entire build, is that inner sole.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to be a really good piece of leather because it's going to hold everything together.
Right. And
the trimming is really important as well because it will affect it. The trimming can affect the way the boot feels when the customer puts it on. It can actually, if the trimming is shy, it can make the boots feel too tight. If it's a little bit too fat, then it can make the boot feel a little bit loose because everything's going to kind of get pulled and stretched around that inner sole. And again, that is the base of the entire construction of the boots.
Right.
So after that, those shoe lasts are all lined up, and Serge does most of this part. Serge is the man.
Go Serge. Go Serge.
Love that kid, man. He's not a kid anymore, but we go way back. Anyways, so wet lasting, the difference between lasting and wet lasting. The great majority of our boots are wet lasted because we have to soak the upper so we can actually pull it and shape it.
Yeah.
Because the work leather especially is so heavy. If you try to do it dry, either it's not going to conform to the shoe last or it will tear because you just can't get it to make that shape. It's just too thick and heavy. So we soak them in really hot water.
Okay.
They put a lace on a couple of those eyelets, and then we take that, and we actually also at that time are soaking the counter, the heel counter, which is a very heavy piece of leather. It's about the same thickness as the inner sole and the outsole, the midsole, if you will. Sorry, not the outsole, the midsole. And we got the pocket where that counter sits in. Those counters are soaked in hot water as well, so we can pull those around and shape because they're super stiff and they won't conform either. But they take and they stuff that counter into the counter pocket where the upper meets the counter pocket and the quarters meet together, and there's a little pocket there.
Okay.
And they stuff the counter in there.
Okay.
Wet.
Yeah.
Then Serge will take a couple of nails, a couple of tacks, and he pulls the heel, tacks it, he pulls the toe and tacks it. And so he just tacks it in a few places while it's wet, just to start to give it the initial shape and the give. And then they set it aside and let it dry.
Okay.
So that's wet lasting. So we would prefer to let those dry for at least 8 hours.
Okay. I was going to ask you how long.
Typically, it's overnight. But during the day, I mean, again, we've got all these shoes in process.
Right.
So we just set them aside on a rack and we just let them dry. Once they're to a desired dryness, then the lasters will take those boots, and now we're going to actually pull all the leather around. They're going to peel the toe back. They're going to apply some glue. They're going to last the liner. And then if they got to put a safety toe in or a elastic toe, those go in at this time.
Okay.
And then they pull the leather tight all the way around the shoe, tack it all the way around, and then there it sits.
Yeah.
And now it's starting to actually look like a boot.
Right. And now you had also mentioned a elastic toe and a steel toe.
Yes.
Want to explain the differences for those real fast?
Sure. So safety toe would be a steel toe or a composition, which is a fiberglass composition. So those are safety rated. That is something, if you have to have a certification. A elastic toe is it's a piece of celastic. So it's kind of like, it's sort of like plastic. It's a fibrous material that we soak in acetone to soften it.
Okay.
And it's just a hard toe. It's more like what you might find in a cowboy Western style boot, kind of just to keep the shape of that pointed toe.
Yeah.
If you don't have something between the vamp, which is the outside leather, and the liner on the inside, the toe will just kind of drop and fall, and
Gotcha.
kind of miss shape.
Okay.
So elastic toe keeps the shape of that toe a little bit longer.
Okay.
Actually, a lot longer, but yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's the difference between those.
Awesome. Thank you for that explanation. Okay, wonderful. So the lasting part obviously could have a big impact on your boot.
Yeah.
That's a make or break kind of a thing for you.
Absolutely.
And so what the customers can do to help with that is getting correct sizing from the beginning, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really going to be the main thing that they can do.
I mean, for the customer's input, yes.
Yeah.
We got to have the proper size. As far as our side of lasting, if and it happens, from time to time, we might pull a piece of leather a little too much on one side or the other, which can cause a boot to look a little bit crooked. If it gets lasted a little bit too loose, that can happen, and that can affect the rest of the build. So sometimes we have to start over, basically, But we'd rather do that than have a customer get an inferior product and then have to start over.
Yeah, definitely. After it's lasted, which is a very important process, we're moving on to shanking and bottoming, correct? Yep. Okay, awesome. Now this is where we're going to add, you described it as the interior guts of the boot, which I really quite enjoyed.
Yep.
Explain that process, Mikey. Take it
so
away.
This is where we're building the foundation of the footbed inside the boot, underneath the inner sole. So we're going to put a real heavy leather shank. We use leather shanks rather than fiberglass or steel.
Why? Oh, I was going to ask why.
Because steel shanks and fiberglass shanks are great, but they break.
Okay.
And steel shanks, if you get them wet, are going to rust.
Oh.
And you lose the integrity of the interior construction it just begins to fall. With the way, especially the 55 shoe last, or the 11067, or the 5332, or the 5812, all the different shoe lasts that we use that have a high arch.
Okay.
It's really critical to have a good heavy shank underneath there, because the shape of that shoe last, it's got a kind of a big curve in it. But also, if that shank is going to settle, so we put a nice thick piece of leather in there, and our goal is to try to maintain the shape of that built-in orthotic as long as possible. So that's the shank. The shank goes on. It's nailed in place, glued. Then the midsole is it's inked to the specific color that the customer has requested.
Mm-hmm.
It's glued precisely. It's the upper that has been lasted and now has been skived in a certain place just behind the ball of the foot
Okay.
and folded back open so it's flat.
Okay.
So then the midsole is glued and the inner sole, put those two pieces together, put it back on the boot jack,
Mm-hmm.
and then the bottomer takes a series of wire fiber soling nails and runs a specific pattern of nails around
Okay.
the horn. I used to call it. I
Round
don't know
horn.
what they say, but you have to attach that sole, that leather part of the sole, to the upper. Make it as much one piece as you possibly can.
Right.
It's a very critical step.
Gotcha. People are looking for a quality boot. What would they look for if they're looking at the bottom of the boot?
So when you look at the bottom of the boot, you're not going to see what we've done there,
Yeah.
but you can see where the midsole has been attached, say, to the heel seat, which is around where your heel is in the cup of the boot.
Okay.
And if you see gaps, if you can see a shiny piece of the nail, this is no bueno.
Yep.
That means we didn't do what we were supposed to do. And that's all the way around from skive to skive on the boot where the vamp leather has been beveled. This is why our boots cannot be classified as waterproof because, water is going to get in there.
Right.
There's just really nothing we can do about it on that type of construction.
Right.
But we can get it pretty darn water resistant if we're doing our job properly in that department. So if you see gaps, if you can see metal, if you can see through to that heavy leather shank piece, which is usually I catch that stuff in my department because I'm looking for those things.
Right.
Then I kick it back and we get that fixed before it goes any farther.
Okay.
So typically you won't have to worry about that.
We've gotten bottoming done. We're moving on. Next step. Does anybody who's listening know where it would go afterwards? Sole stitching. Yes. Good job. I'm
Comes to
assuming
me.
again you were right. Yeah.
That's-
Goes to Mikey. That's right. Sole stitching. Okay. So this is where, what are we doing? You tell me since this is
the sole stitcher, the curved needle sole stitcher, attaches the outer sole to the upper. And
Beautiful.
that's basically all it does.
Now, how might this affect the boot wearing experience?
Well, considering, if we don't get that first row, if we don't nail the first row of stitching, that's a problem.
Yeah.
It needs to be snug up against the inner sole. Actually, that first row is kind of riding around on the inner sole against the shoe last, and that is kind of just keeping everything together in the front. There's a big series of nails around the back.
Yeah.
Unless it's a 360 stitch down, which that's probably a whole nother podcast.
Probably.
But, yeah. So the first row is really important. We want to get a decent amount of stitching per inch. It's going to hold the boot together. It's going to keep the vamp snug against your foot, not allow you to bang around in the inside of your boot, because that's what's going to tear it apart faster than anything else. Poor fitting footwear is the enemy for us. If it doesn't fit well, it's going to deteriorate much quicker. The second row is just kind of a reinforcement, and it's probably more for cosmetic stability than anything else.
Right.
But it looks pretty cool.
It sure
with two rows
does.
on. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it looks nice. Now, we do have people that will ask quite often why some boot stitching goes all the way through and others don't.
Right.
Do you have a good answer for that?
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact.
Perfect.
So we pretty much now stitch through just about every outsole.
Mhm.
The only reason we wouldn't is because the outsole and the midsole material is just too darn thick. So on a traditional hot shot
Mhm.
fire boot, or, you know, a variation of that style of construction, it's too much material.
Mm.
And the machine kind of can do it, but the lug sole is not stable as it runs through that machine. It's
Okay.
bouncing a lot, and it's, you know, it's peaks and valleys, you know, going through the sole stitcher. And so sometimes the needle and the awl have to be aligned just right. And if it's too thick, sometimes it just doesn't allow the awl and the needle to line up together, and it'll break thread. It'll skip
Okay.
stitches. It will just decide it's not going to stitch at all.
Right.
It'll break my awl. It'll break the needle. And unfortunately, that's not what we want to do, because those needles and awls are getting more and more expensive every day. An
Right.
awl is about $9 a piece,
Okay.
and I go through quite a few in a day already.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
In normal
So
circumstances.
that's the reason. That's the reason that some of the lug soles don't get stitched through.
Okay. So it really depends on thickness of
Yeah,
that lug sole for sure.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. Now you've done your part. You pass it off to heel stacks.
Yep.
Next.
Yep.
Okay. Now this is where we're actually going to build the heel
Yep.
of the boot. Explain that process, Mikey.
Okay, so if we're going to put a heel on your boot, it's going to get a heavy leather heel base. We drive a series of nails into the heel stack and down into the shoe. And then we rough that smooth leather part of the heel stack. We rough it up on a sander. And then we glue it up, and we take a rubber heel cap and we glue that up. And then we set those aside for a little bit so that it gets contact cement. And then, you know, we're going to drive another series of nails into that heel cap, the rubber part of the heel, and that's heels.
Nice. Okay. Now you said that they were leather, so we don't do wooden heels.
Yeah, that's a common misconception.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually, back long time ago, I'm talking to a customer on the phone, and he says to me that wood part of the heel fell off, and I said, wood? What wood?
Yeah.
He said, well, the part that is the piece of wood under the rubber part. And I said, that's not wood, it's leather.
Yeah.
No, it's wood.
No.
And he argued with me.
And you're like, no.
I'm like, wow. Okay. You can rest assured I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
It's not wood. But, you know, I wasn't gonna belabor the argument too much.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's leather.
Yep. So fun fact, not wood, that is leather. I'm sure a lot of our listeners knew that.
And it's
but
super dense, and it's probably harder than wood,
I was
actually.
going to say, you could guess, honestly, that it is. Now, there's something that I see on the site. Other people might be confused about this as well, but I see the term classic arch and moderate arch. Can you explain kind of what the difference is there, what I might think about
So
there?
a classic arch is basically our flagship style boots that we built this company on 60 years ago.
Yeah.
It's a logger style arch. It's a logger style heel base. So basically our logger style heel bases come with what we call lifts. It comes with five lifts. So it's approximately so tall.
Yeah.
So classic is a little bit higher. It's a little bit taller. We sling it underneath the shank just a little bit. And that's to support, again, that shank, to try and keep the shape of that inside that built-in orthotic.
Yeah.
That's in the classic style PNW boot.
Gotcha.
The moderate is a little bit lower heel. It's a three lift stack. The moderate shank, or the moderate arch support, is quite a little bit less aggressive.
Okay.
It's a little flatter through the shank, so we don't have to raise it as high. And also, we set that heel back a little bit further because typically your moderate heels are what we would call a block heel, which is more of like a shoe style, like an old school shoe style.
Yeah.
Not a Pacific Northwest necessarily style.
Gotcha. Considering the height of the boots is going to be that classic is going to be taller, moderate it's going to be
and
a little less.
That's basically the only difference we're talking about is the way the built-in orthotic is shaped.
Gotcha.
On the classic or the moderate.
Okay.
That's the difference.
Perfect. Now we've got the heel stack built. That's done. We're moving along. We have 2 steps after this. We have sanding and we have finishing. So we're in sanding right now. This is where we're really refining the sole and the heel to give it that final shape, kind of just molding it into that last little piece that people will see. Explain this process to me, Mikey.
So we're going to take the boot is basically the materials are all pretty raw. There's a lot of excess around the toe and around the heel. The heel bases are still just a blocky, big old chunk of leather and rubber. And now we're going to give the whole entire bottom and heel its shape. So those guys are in there, man. They've got 3 guys over there just breaking their back all day long. That's probably, aside from lasting and bottoming are pretty hard work. That's pretty hard work. But to stand at a sander all day, the way those guys do, I know how difficult it is because I did it for a long time.
Yeah.
When I was a child, I was forced into, no, I'm
I was going to say child labor. Here we go.
That's basically where I cut my teeth.
Throwing it back.
In shoemaking was in sanding.
Okay.
And so it's really hard work, but they're going to take we use the rough paper belt, sanding belt that we use is a 24 grit, which is super aggressive.
Yeah.
And boy, if you slip, it will take the hide right off you. It instantaneously. You're going to suffer. It's terrible. So it's, it takes a skill. It takes some time to learn how to get that shape. And then, you have, it's pretty crafty over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, most of the stuff that we're doing, yes, is pretty crafty.
Sure.
But this is a pretty crafty skill. Getting that shape always pretty much the same, that beveled logger style. And then the more of the block style heel is just kind of a flat shape around the back. And then they use 120 grit fine paper. And we've taken all that excess off, all the hard edge. We've given it a nice shape. And then they come back to the other side of the sander with that fine paper and make it nice and smooth and give it that final pretty touch, and it's all ready to get inked up. On to finishing we go.
On to finishing we go. Nice segue there. Nice job. So finishing, it's what it sounds like. Can anybody guess in the audience? Final touches. Finishing touches, you could even say. So
back 2 steps.
Yep.
After the heel's attached, we actually pull the last out of the boot.
Oh, yeah.
That's
critical.
So they've been sanded. Now they're going to the finishers. Mm-hmm. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to look at the boot and make sure that we haven't sanded into stitching, sanded into the upper. The shape of the boot is relatively uniform. And the one thing that kind of gets lost in the shuffle is we're not just making a boot, we're making a pair of boots.
Yeah.
So we want them to kind of match each other, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
weird.
If one's shaped kind of goofy, the other one's shaped really nice, that's not a pair.
Yeah.
So the finishers are checking to make sure, they look relatively like they're a pair of boots. Like this one looks pretty much the same as this one. It's just a left and a right. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the first thing. That's just kind of overall, just kind of look at the thing and assess that it's been it's been finished well. They're going to look and make sure that we've used the right leather. They're going to make sure we got the right heel on it. They're going to make sure that we put the right last in it. It's the right size. The size is stamped inside. There's a lot of things that these guys do.
Yeah.
It's not just, putting ink on and polishing up and then away it goes.
Right.
So this is a critical step. The next thing they're going to do is they're going to set the boot on their bench, and they're going to look inside, and all those tacks and nails that have come up through that inner sole, they're going to take a piece of rebar and a real heavy, basically sledgehammer, and they're going to pound nails down. So hopefully when you get your boots, you don't feel any nail heads or not heads, but actually tips, like poking into your
parts.
foot.
Yeah.
So they get that all done, make sure it's nice and, relatively flat and smooth on the inner sole. And then they're going to take what we call a sock liner, which is a piece of leather that has been split real thin. And most of the nails are, all the nails really are from about the middle, just behind the ball of the foot back through the heel. And that sock liner, it actually serves a function, is to cover all of that in the construction. So there's dents and there's, it's cosmetic, and it also gives a little bit of cushion rather than you put your foot in and your foot's landed on top of all that kind of roughed up leather in the inner sole. So it just kind of makes a little transition for you.
Okay.
And so a sock liner isn't just like, it's real pretty inside there, I mean, it actually serves a function.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So so then after it gets sock lined, then it goes over to whichever color we're going to finish it in, whether it's just beeswax, no color, or natural stain is applied, or brown stain or black stain is applied to the outer edge. It's set aside to dry and kind of hopefully soak into the leather. There's a little bit of wax in the stain, and then it's polished off with a series of brushes and wheels, and then a real heavy coat of wax is applied to a special wheel, and then the boot is spun around on that wheel, and it lays a layer of wax on that, and then it's pulled off with a brush, and it gives it that real nice shine, real nice finished look.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah.
Now the finishing on the edge, you were talking about the beeswax. What does that, is that a functional thing, or is that just kind of to?
I mean, we're hoping once we get the boot to that point, we're hoping that, first of all, the color, it doesn't matter what kind of stain you use. It doesn't matter. If it gets wet, it's going to bleed. I mean, they just don't make a stain. Well, they might make an ink or something, but it's probably fairly toxic.
Right.
And they don't even know if those kind of things are even available anymore.
Right.
So yeah, the beeswax, for example, we're kind of trying to put kind of a seal, I guess, if you will, on the outside edge of the leather part of the sole, and then that heel base, that's leather as well. That's not wood. Yeah. It's leather.
Yep.
So we're trying to seal that up somewhat.
Right.
With some wax, and all, it's all cosmetic. And but there's some functionality to it as well.
Okay, very nice. We just made a whole boot.
Yes, we did.
Or at least talked through the
process. And it only took like an hour and a half.
Look at that. We can just pump them out. That's so easy.
Yeah, piece of cake, man.
And now, as you can tell, for listeners, there are so many things you can consider when you're creating a boot.
Indeed.
Which is, I think, what makes it so challenging coming from the outside into the boot world. Like, you had no idea there were this many components to a boot that you ever had to consider in your life. So for people who are listening and all of this made things a little bit more confusing, go on the website and shop by function. That will, lead you to the right place. If you're trying to get a work boot, that will kind of show you what you need. If you're wanting to get a casual heritage boot, heritage is another term we use for casual or like everyday wear boots, then just kind of find a boot that you like on the site. Don't worry so much about customization. You can just kind of make that choice there. If you want to super customize your boots, we do have those options. And hopefully this episode helps you kind of understand a little bit more all of your options that you have and how it might affect your boot depending on what decision you make. Thank you, Mikey, for your expertise. You are a wealth of knowledge. And
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to come and talk with you guys, and you make me feel so special.
well, you are special, Mikey. And you're a born star, which I think we determined
Right?
earlier.
Yes, we've established that many, many years ago.
Exactly. So I'm sure everyone loved you, and you're going to get glowing reviews on the podcast. For everyone that's listening, first of all, tell Mikey what a great job he did and what a star he is. Secondly, make sure that you like, subscribe, follow on whatever platform you're watching this on. That way you don't miss our future boot buying guide. I will get into more topics in future videos. So like I said, ask questions. If you have questions, share your stories with us. We'd love to share those as well. Thank you very much for listening or watching if you're doing that. And I hope this was helpful for you.
Can I say one more thing before?
Yes, yes.
I always like to do this whenever I'm in here.
Okay.
I look in the camera and say, thank you very much. We love our customers. I love our customers. If it's not for you, I don't pay my mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important. I appreciate your patronage. We do.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for choosing Nick's Handmade Boots. It means a lot to me personally. Thanks so much.
Awesome. That was so sweet, Mikey. Yes, thank you for all the things. And thank you, Mikey, for being incredible at making boots, for caring so much about it, and for working with the team back there of incredible makers.
Absolutely.
You guys make a beautiful product.
Yes.
All
yes,
right.
they do.
They sure do. Actually, I get my first pair soon. I finally get to pick them out, and I'm so excited. I cannot wait.
Awesome.
So you guys better be extra nice to them.
Can't wait to make them. Can't wait to
All
build
right.
them.
Thank you, Mikey. I'll have you on a future episode. I appreciate
All right.
you.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah,
Have a
you
good
bet.
day.